Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I am Constable Janine Robertson, and I will be your moderator today. In the true spirit of truth and reconciliation, we will begin by acknowledging the traditional and treaty territory on which we gather today. The city of Windsor is situated on the traditional territory of Three Fires Confederacy, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. We honor and respect the historical and ongoing contributions of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples to the region and express respect for their enduring presence and stewardship of the land. Miigwech. The media release for the investigation, along with the supporting documents, including an addendum of charged persons, photos, graphics, and B-roll, are being distributed through the OPP news release portal. Our first speaker with formal remarks is OPP Chief Superintendent Mike Stoddart. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good morning. On behalf of Ontario Provincial Police Commissioner Thomas Carrique, thank you for joining us. Today, we are announcing the results of Project Bay, a significant intelligence-led investigation targeting organized criminal networks involved in the importation and trafficking of illegal drugs. This investigation brought together municipal, provincial, federal, international law enforcement partners with a shared goal: protecting our communities and disrupting organized crime. The results are staggering. Investigators seized nearly 1.7 metric tons of drugs along with 17 firearms. This represents one of the largest drug seizures by weight in Ontario. More importantly, these drugs will never reach our communities. Every kilogram seized and every weapon removed from circulation represents harm prevented, lives protected, and fewer opportunities for criminal networks to profit. Success depends on our ability to collaborate, share intelligence, and leverage the unique expertise of each partner agency. Thank you to every investigator, analyst, and partner agency involved for their professionalism, commitment, and tireless work on this complex investigation. I will now turn the podium over to OPP Acting Detective Superintendent Andy Bradford, who will provide additional details regarding this investigation. Thank you. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chief, and good morning, everyone. Organized crime does not respect borders, and as law enforcement, neither can we. Project Bay is a strong example of what can be achieved when agencies work together to address criminal activity that crosses jurisdictions and borders. I would like to provide an overview of the investigative work that led to these significant results. Project Bay began in January 2025 when the Windsor Police Service initiated an investigation into drug trafficking activity. During its early stages, the CBSA and Windsor Police Service collaborated to advance the investigation and identified a cross-border trafficking network. As the scope and complexity of the investigation expanded, the Ontario Provincial Police became involved through the Border Enforcement Security Task Force and the Border Drug Interdiction Task Force. Additional law enforcement partners contributed intelligence, operational support, and specialized expertise. U.S. agencies, including Homeland Security Investigations and the Drug Enforcement Administration, supported the international aspects of the investigation, while the Toronto Police Service and Peel Regional Police provided critical investigative and enforcement assistance. Together, these partnerships allowed investigators to build a comprehensive understanding of the criminal network involved. A key finding of the investigation was the identification of a broker-style transportation model operating within the commercial transportation sector. Investigators identified a network coordinating the movement and distribution of large quantities of drugs through otherwise legitimate supply chains. This included coordinating shipments and arranging drivers to knowingly transport concealed drugs within commercial loads. This method highlights the evolving tactics used by criminal networks and the importance of intelligence-led policing that adapts alongside emerging threats. I want to be clear that the overwhelming majority of individuals and businesses operating within the trucking and transportation industry are law-abiding professionals who play a critical role in our economy. However, criminal networks will attempt to exploit any vulnerability they perceive to further their criminal activity. On June 25th, investigators executed 18 search warrants at residences and businesses located in Windsor, LaSalle, Corunna, Brampton, and Kleinburg. These coordinated enforcement actions involved numerous officers and support personnel from participating agencies, including OPP Organized Crime Enforcement Bureau and Specialty Units, Windsor Police Service, CBSA, Toronto Police Service, Peel Regional Police, London Police Service, Chatham-Kent Police Service, and the RCMP. Between July 14th and July 20th, 4 additional search warrants were executed in Markham, Caledon, and Brampton. As a result of those search warrants and throughout the investigation, investigators seized 973 kilograms of cocaine, 660 kilograms of methamphetamine, 49 kilograms of opium, and 17 firearms, including the anti-tank rifle you see in front of me. The estimated street value of the drugs seized exceeds $139 million. Some may look at a seizure of this magnitude and ask whether it represents a failure of border security. The answer is no. The fact that these drugs were identified, investigated, and ultimately seized demonstrates that law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border are working together effectively to detect and disrupt criminal activity. The firearms seized in this investigation highlight the persistent link between drug trafficking and the threat of violence. Criminal networks rely on firearms to protect their operations, enforce territory, intimidate competitors, and facilitate the movement of illicit drugs. The seizure of 17 firearms demonstrates the significant risk these networks pose to our communities and to law enforcement officers. Removing these weapons from circulation is a critical part of disrupting criminal activity and enhancing public safety. In total, 21 individuals have been charged with 102 offenses. Of those, 19 have been arrested and 2 remain outstanding. While the seizure of nearly 1.7 metric tons of drugs is significant, it is important to remember that investigations like this are about more than the quantities involved. They are about dismantling criminal networks that cause significant harm to communities. Before I conclude, I want to recognize the investigators, intelligence analysts, and support personnel whose dedication made these results possible. Investigations of this scale do not happen overnight. They require months of planning, coordination, and persistence. They involve long hours, late nights, early mornings, and time spent away from family and loved ones. The members involved in this investigation made significant personal sacrifices while remaining focused on the shared goal of protecting our communities and holding criminal networks accountable. Their commitment, professionalism, and attention to detail were instrumental to the success of Project Bay, and they should be proud of what they have accomplished. I also want to thank our policing and law enforcement partners for the trust, collaboration, and expertise they brought to this investigation. We remain committed to identifying, investigating, and dismantling criminal networks that threaten the safety of our communities. I now welcome Windsor Police Service Chief Jason Crowley to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome colleagues from across the province to Windsor today as we announce the results of Project Bay. I would like to recognize and thank Chief Superintendent Mike Stoddard of the Ontario Provincial Police, Acting Detective Superintendent Andy Bradford of the Ontario Provincial Police Organized Crime Enforcement Bureau, Regional Director General Michael Prozia of the Canada Border Services Agency, Superintendent Ryan Ford of the Toronto Police Service Organized Crime Enforcement, and Deputy Chief Nick Milanovich of the Peel Regional Police Service. Project Bay began as a Windsor Police Service investigation in January 2025. At that time, we had no way of measuring the scale or impact of the project. Our investigators and officers treated this investigation with the same care and commitment as any other investigation. As they did this, the scope of this criminal enterprise became much more clear. Investigators uncovered a sophisticated network with ties to the Greater Toronto Area and involvement in the cross-border drug trafficking. What started as a local operation soon evolved into a massive multi-agency effort. This project took 18 months from start to finish. To see it to completion, we worked with law enforcement partners at the municipal, provincial, federal, and international levels. It required flexibility, leadership, cooperation, and literally thousands of hours of labor. All of this resulted in what you see today, 17 firearms, and over $139 million in illegal drugs. Project Bay was the product of diligent and professional police work, and it shows the value of strong intelligence gathering, careful analysis, and effective information sharing. This investigation started because our officers were on the ground, identifying patterns and collecting intelligence. It continued because our members evaluated that intelligence, shared it with our partners, and translated it into decisive action. This type of work is particularly important for Windsor community. As a border city, we are not just combating local crime. We are combating crime that moves across international boundaries. The drugs and weapons trafficked through this community typically spread across other communities in Ontario. And together with our partners, we are cutting them off at the source. This operation demonstrates what happens when law enforcement partners work together to protect those that we serve. We've seized an arsenal of weapons and nearly 1.7 tons of illegal drugs. It's an impressive visual, but I'm most struck by the images we're not seeing today. The drugs in this room are not ending up in the hands of our community's vulnerable population. The firearms in this room are not sowing chaos in our communities. And because of Project Bay, we will see fewer lives destroyed and fewer families torn apart. This is the true impact of Project Bay. And this is why it makes me so proud of our officers and all of our partners and everyone who had a hand in this operation. Now, in closing, I would like to commend and pass along my complete gratitude for the diligence, professionalism, and commitment of our law enforcement officers and our partners. Because of this commitment to service, our community has remained some of the safest in North America. And with that, I will conclude my remarks today and hand it over to Regional Director General Michael Prozia of the Canada Border Services Agency. Michael.
Thank you, Chief Crowley, and good morning. My name is Michael Prozia. I'm the Regional Director General for the Canada Border Services Agency's Southern Ontario region. This multi-jurisdictional, cross-border investigation has resulted in the seizure of nearly 1.7 tons of illegal drugs, illustrates how collaboration between law enforcement is the key to disrupting transnational organized crime. I'm incredibly proud of this work, which was accomplished with our partners in this investigation. Since February of 2025, the Canada Border Services Agency has been working closely with the Windsor Police Service to advance the investigation and identify cross-border drug smuggling. As the investigation evolved, we collaborated with more partners, including the Ontario Provincial Police. Throughout the investigation, Border Services officers intercepted over 1.1 tons of drugs that criminal groups were attempting to smuggle across the border. We shared vital intelligence and surveillance information with our partners and assisted with the execution of search warrants. The drug shipments that we stopped at the border included 470 kilograms of cocaine on May 23rd of this year, 431 kilograms of methamphetamine, and close to 43 kilograms of cocaine on June 2nd, as well as over 200 kilograms of cocaine on June 24th. All of these enforcement actions took place at the Blue Water Bridge Port of Entry in Sarnia, Ontario. The Canada Border Services Agency prevents drugs from entering the country and keeps our community safe. Our Border Services officers are Canada's first line of defense, keeping communities safe from illegal drugs and from organized crime. So far this year, the CBSA in Southern Ontario has seized over 200 firearms and 5,500 kilograms of illegal drugs at our land ports of entry. Timely, effective intelligence sharing and cross-border cooperation have helped us track, disrupt, and dismantle the criminal networks that attempt to operate across our borders and harm our communities. Once again, I would like to thank the Ontario Provincial Police, Windsor Police Services, and all of our partners involved with Project Bay for working with the CBSA to keep our communities safe. Lastly, I'd like to thank our Border Services officers, our intelligence officers, analysts, and criminal investigators for their diligence working on Project Bay. With that, I would like to welcome Superintendent Ryan Ford from the Toronto Police Services to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of Chief Myron Demke and the Toronto Police Service to announce the results of an investigation that truly demonstrates what can be achieved when law enforcement agencies work together to keep our community safe. Early in 2026, the Toronto Police Service Drug Squad was investigating a criminal network operating in the Greater Toronto Area. As that investigation progressed, we realized that it had cross-border implications. Through discussions with our policing partners, we determined that our primary targets were also being investigated through Project Bay, quickly turning this into a joint forces operation. Criminal networks like these know no borders. They operate across jurisdictions, which is why partnerships like this are so important. Together, we prevented significant quantity of dangerous illegal narcotics, over 1 ton, from reaching our streets and causing tremendous harm in our communities. This seizure demonstrates the shared commitment of every agency involved in protecting the safety and well-being of the public. I want to thank the members of the Toronto Police Drug Squad, the Ontario Provincial Police, Windsor Police, the Canada Border Services Agency, Peel Regional Police, York Regional Police, and the DEA, and to all our other law enforcement partners for their professionalism, dedication, and commitment. I also want special thanks to the Criminal Intelligence Services of Ontario. And thank you very much, and I'd like to welcome Peel Regional Police Deputy Chief Nick Milanovich to the podium.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Project Bay, some of the results that you see here, delivered a clear message to organized crime. And that message is, if you traffic drugs in our communities, we, alongside our partners, will work together in order to find you and hold you accountable. This investigation dismantled a sophisticated cross-border trafficking network that relied on the logistics industry to move massive quantities of illegal drugs and firearms into Canada. Together with our policing partners in Canada and the United States, as you've heard, we've seized nearly 1.7 tons, or well over 3,400 pounds of illegal drugs worth $140 million, have recovered 17 illegal firearms, laid 102 criminal charges against 21 people, all this of which has been covered already today. We're very proud as a police organization to partner with our partners and to have worked with the investigators that are responsible for this. And I'm going to break from script a little bit because you've heard a lot from the speakers prior about how important this is. But I think it's really important to take an opportunity and see what you have here before you right now. This demonstrates an evolution of crime that makes its way to all of our communities in Peel, Toronto, Windsor, really throughout Ontario and Canada. It has entirely changed. But what you also see is a change in how we, the policing community, are approaching this. We're working together. Transnational organized crime has no boundaries. The good news is neither do our police services. We will continue to work together, and we'll continue to make sure that anybody that tries to come into our communities and take advantage of the same things that draw law-abiding citizens to our community are not capitalized on organized crime networks that are looking to take advantage of those same characteristics. And so I would like to close with a heartfelt thank you to all of the investigators who you can't see, who are in the back of the room. I cannot tell you how much our community, obviously on behalf of my chief, myself, and all the speakers you've heard from, how much we appreciate the work that you put into making sure that you protect our communities and hold people that attempt to victimize them accountable. Very well done. Thank you.
We will now open the floor to any questions for the speakers. Please identify yourself, which outlet you are with, and who the question is for. You may ask one question and one follow-up.
Hi, Maureen. Hi, Maureen with Blackbird News. I guess Windsor Police Chief or maybe the CBSA, I'm not sure who this is for. You talked about dismantling the network. Can you specify, do you believe this is the whole network, an arm of the network? How big of a part of this is dismantled?
Now that I've walked up here, this may be a question for CBSA, but I will just talk about it a little bit. Yeah, like, I mean, these are, unfortunately, these are not dismantling entire networks. The networks run very deep. Our investigators are aware. This investigation may be at a conclusion now, but it does lead to other criminal organizations, organized crime. So this work is never done. But it's certainly, as you can see, a very large dent in someone's business. So definitely there will be more work to this, offshoots of Project Bay, and they could lead to other projects. But certainly we're super proud of what they've done and the disruption of the sources at this point, especially in our community in Windsor, the border. Thank you. Michael.
Thank you for your question. On behalf of the CBSA, I think what's important to note is while we had significant seizures as part of this investigation, the intelligence that we've gathered from these seizures has helped us not only in these communities, but across Canada. We have a national targeting center in Ottawa. What that will help to do in the intelligence that we feed from this investigation into that will help make intelligence-led referrals at other ports of entry across the country to further identify and disrupt these networks. So what you're seeing today is a great start for us in terms of being able to broaden our work and make smart intelligence-led referrals. Thank you.
The two remaining suspects are listed as Windsor residents. Obviously, their names were withheld, but can you say, do you believe these are dangerous people on the streets? Do you have any idea of where they might be, or what is the status of those two
Certainly.
people?
I mean, the investigators certainly aren't going to, stop looking for them. Certainly, they're local. There's only so much I can say about it right now, but they're local people. They're definitely on our radar, and let's just say we are actively looking for them. Fair? Thanks.
Chief, stay up there. Chris Campbell, CTV.
Hi, Chris.
Just hoping you could tell us, what does this investigation tell you about how organized crime is operating here in Windsor?
Well, I mean, our community does not differ from any other community in Ontario or Canada when it comes to organized crime. I think it was mentioned by a couple of the investigators. This is a broad network. This has got multiple tentacles throughout North America, let alone just Windsor and Ontario. So what it tells me is that this runs very deep, and it's disturbing, to be honest. But the fact that our investigators are on top of it, and it's always evolving, and the important piece is so are the police. And I think that was said as well. And this is a perfect example, what I'm surrounded by up here today, and our evolution on our, platform that we work together so well together in policing agencies. But it's disturbing. And, I truly do lose sleep over stuff like this for our community and other communities. But we will continue to do our best and continue to work towards this end goal of disrupting as much as we can.
Should residents be concerned about how sophisticated these trafficking networks have become?
Well, I think there is a concern, and residents, I'm not going to say they shouldn't be concerned, for sure. They should be concerned because, again, look at what we're surrounded by here today. But it's not, I don't think it's an everyday issue where they leave their house and have to worry about their public safety or their own personal safety. But it's something that the best takeaway, I suppose, for our community is that the police are on top of this. And again, this doesn't stop here. So I think that's the message for our community and other communities in Ontario. Okay.
Excuse me, Jason Vio here from CBC News. I think the question is for either OPP Chief Superintendent or the OPP Acting Detective Superintendent. I know it was just discussed that this operation isn't believed to have dismantled entirely a criminal network, but can you give us a sense of how much you believe these criminal networks were disrupted by this investigation, and if those that you arrested are believed to be pretty high up within those criminal networks?
Well, good morning, and thank you for the question. And it's an excellent question. Organized crime is sophisticated and they are organized, and they will identify vulnerabilities and gaps. And I think that is what you've seen in this case, and they'll work to exploit it. The group in this case was very organized. To Deputy Chief Milinovich's point, I would describe it as transnational in scope. And very organized, but I do think we've made a significant dent. But that's why investigations like Project Bay are so important, to provide that deterrence for other criminal activity and related groups that are involved in similar activities, and also to disrupt these groups where we can.
Okay. And there was mention of working with American law enforcement partners. I know it isn't really your jurisdiction to say if any Americans were arrested, but do you have any sense of the scope of the connection between the U.S. and Canada with this investigation, and if that led U.S. authorities to similar arrests and seizures?
Yes, that excellent question. The investigation remains ongoing. I can tell you that the scope of this drug trafficking network extends into the southwestern United States, and we'll continue to work with our American partners, in this case, the Department of Homeland Security Investigations and the Drug Enforcement Administration, to share intelligence and enforcement information and bring those people to justice.
Okay. Thank you.
Rob Hindy from AM 800 here in Windsor. Andy, just this caught our eye, I think, right when we walked in. Why would someone have this, and how unique is it for police to seize a rifle like that?
No, excellent question. This is a Lati L39 50 caliber anti-tank rifle. It is very rare. What I would tell you is that this is a military ordinance. It has no legitimate civilian application, and the fact that it's in the hands of organized drug traffickers is a concerning public safety issue.
Thank you. David Lowett, CBC National News here. Got a few questions. I wanted to touch on this. Firstly, this question's for the OPP. Could there potentially be links to Mexican cartels with the cocaine that was seized? Could you tell us a bit more where the cocaine was coming from or originated?
I'm not going to speak to specific affiliations, but what I will tell you is that we can track the origin of some of these shipments that were intercepted at the port of entry and also seized in Ontario back to the southwestern United States. So logically, Mexico is a well-known transshipment point with drug cartels for cocaine. They're also large producers of methamphetamine due to the access to precursor chemicals. But I won't speak to specific affiliations at this time, as the investigation remains ongoing.
Thank you. And my next question is for the CPSA. These massive seizures, they often happen at the Blue Water Bridge. What is it about the crossings from Michigan to Ontario that leads criminal groups to use them to move drugs?
Great question. It's such a vital hub between the Canadian and U.S. economy, the kind of southwestern or all of southern Ontario. Over 40% of all commercial trucks travel through this corridor from the United States. So naturally, with this Project Bay investigation, all the interdictions that we had at the border were through the commercial trucking space. It's natural that this hub is one that where you get a significant amount of enforcement. But what I would like to add is that we see trends move. It's not always particular ports of entry. We've seen a movement of our traffic across various ports of entry over the years, and we've seen an influx in traffic overall at the Blue Water Bridge. So naturally, when we see an influx in traffic at a particular port of entry, there'll be additional enforcement efforts there as well. So the intelligence that we gather as part of this will help us make those sound referrals across all of our ports of entry in Southern Ontario. So we're well placed at each of our ports of entry in order to mitigate and find the narcotics like you see at this table here. Thank you.
Thank you. And my last question is for the Toronto Police Service. You had mentioned you were investigating an organized crime group here in the GTA. What can you tell us about that group and its ties abroad?
Martin, thanks for the question. I think what has been stated earlier, these investigations are ongoing and they're multifaceted. And I don't think I'm in a position to comment on the investigation as a whole right now.
Hi there, Miller Holmeshill from the Windsor Star. I guess this would be for the CBSA, but with the Gordie Howe Bridge set to open in a few days, is there any concern that we might see more of an influx in this type of activity coming through the Windsor-Essex area?
Yeah, excellent question. I think it will be very interesting to see once the Gordie Howe International Bridge does open, how traffic patterns will change and normalize. I think on the positive side, it's going to be the most futuristic port of entry that we have in terms of technology, in terms of detection equipment, in terms of personnel, and the ability that we will have at that location to interdict narcotics, firearms, and other items. I think we're going to be really well placed to do that. We've had our staff preparing now over a period of several years, really anxious to get ready and going. But again, we talk about how complex these networks are, and they're complex too in terms of their movements. So we are going to have to be quite nimble as an agency in making sure that we are moving to where the threats are. But the Gordie Howe International Bridge will certainly change the dynamic in terms of traffic patterns and where we anticipate volumes going.
Perfect, thank you.
This concludes the formal portion of this media event. We will now move to one-on-one interviews with our speakers or those in attendance available for questions. Thank you for joining us today as we share the results of this impactful investigation.